Hey everybody, welcome. An abrupt entrance into our final session today. This is the season finale, I know that there's a certain kind of rule number one about teaching or movies or any kind of like any offering, that you don't promise too much. You don't want to like oversell. You don't want to build up expectations. You keep expectations low and people will appreciate it. But let me just tell you, I'm going to blow your mind today. I'm going to blow your mind. So I can't resist. It's good. It's so good what we're going to learn today. So so strap in. Let's say a blessing just to sanctify this learning. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. We're so blessed to learn Torah. Okay, so the goats. We're looking at the goats. We've been looking at the goats. We took a kind of a slow start and began to build the drama of the Yom Kippur ceremony with the high priest and the high priest having to go through all these rituals to be sequestered, to be dressed and undressed in front of everybody, to make confession upon confession upon confession. But surely the thing that we have been looking to figure out this whole time, the thing that brought us to this topic, the thing that makes the Yom Kippur service so very strange to the point that it seems almost heretical, paganistic, if you will, are the two goats. The two goats. So let's just remind ourselves once more where we started when we started thinking about all of these goats, and that is right back to the beginning of it all, to the Torah. Though we've been spending most of our time in the Rabbi's recounting of the Yom Kippur service, the Yom Kippur service is first mentioned in the Torah, and it contains this long description of all of these offerings that Aaron is going to make. This is Leviticus chapter 16. On Yom Kippur, there's the language right there of atonement, Kippur. But this is the line that really at least has always captivated me and has been really the center point of our attention in this series. And Aaron shall take the two he-goats and let them stand before the Eternal at the entrance of the tent of meeting, and he shall place lots upon the two goats, one marked for the Eternal and one marked for Azazel. Lots, drawing two lots. And one will come out for God and one will come out for Azazel. We spent a lot of time just even last week, trying to figure out what is Azazel. My gosh, it sounds like a foreign god. It's described by Rashi as a place somewhere out there. And after all, this description does say that after Aaron lays his hands on the head of the live goat and confesses over it all of the iniquities and transgressions of the Israelites, then it shall be sent off to the wilderness through a designated man. Thus shall the goat carry on it all their iniquities to an inaccessible region, and the goat shall be set free in the wilderness. Okay. Set free is already a translation, actually. It says it shall be sent out into the wilderness. And as we know, Rashi's going to, and the tradition is going to suggest that it doesn't just get sent out into the wilderness, but actually pushed over a cliff, and that's hence the term the scapegoat, right? The goat that goes off the cliff and carries our sins down with it off that cliff. Now that, first of all, we had the word Azazel. Like, what is that? And secondly, what does it even mean that a goat carries our sins out into the wilderness? Like that's strange too. But today, and just again, we're talking two goats here. One is sacrificed just regular style to God. This is a goat that, like, we have a sacrificial system. I suppose that's weird enough, but let's take that as a given. One's just regular goat. And then there's this other one that goes out into the wilderness. And so, okay, so here we are. We're finally going to take a look at that goat. What happens to that goat? Where does that goat go? What happens out there in the wilderness? And we're going to get a rabbinic account of it. And before we finish, we're going to see some supernatural magic, and that won't be by a long shot the wildest thing that we learned today. Okay, so here we go. We head in to, and we've already looked at the first two confessions. Right, the first confession, I'll remind you, is that the priest makes a confession for himself and his family, and the second confession for the priesthood, the leadership of Israel. Okay, the third confession will be over the goat. Okay, now we begin this final process by in chapter 6 of Masechet Yoma, and I say that all those, if you haven't been with us, we've been looking at the Mishnah, the rabbinic code put together in the year 220, and it's the Mishnah that gives us the most dramatic account, I think, of the Yom Kippur service. So we've been looking at this, and in chapter 6, we really get to the goats. There's some stupid pun there to be had about getting my goat, but here let's take a look at how the chapter opens, because it opens in there's drama here, right? There's like, we saw the priest behind a curtain, we saw the priest confess, and everybody exclaims, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed, blessed is the glory of the kingship of God forever. Like, very dramatic moments. And then there are some very mundane details along the way, sort of back and forth between drama and details. And here we start chapter 6 with what appears to be just some details, just some information about how some instruction manual about how you get this done. Okay, so let's take a look, and this is going to be important. We're going to spend a lot of time trying to process this. I haven't shared the source yet, but let's just take a look first together at the first Mishnah. Okay, Shnei Seiri Yom HaKippurim, the two goats of Yom Kippur. Mitzvatan shiyu shnehem shavim. The mitzvah is that they should be alike in appearance, in size, in value, and that they be purchased at the exact same time. Okay? Now this language, the mitzvah, in Hebrew over here, mitzvatan, it's sort of idiomatic, and it means the best way to do the mitzvah. This is a commandment, and mitzvatan, when you really want to do the commandment, you do it like this. Okay, so I say that because we're soon gonna have some leeway here, but the highest way to do the mitzvah is what? Can someone just describe what they just saw? What's the best way to perform this mitzvah? Let's just repeat this because this will be important. Someone do that kind of pop quiz responding. Jack.
So this is about what we just saw about the value and the appearance and the timing of the purchase of the goats, and they be the same for all obvious purposes. Great.
Okay, that's right. You got 3 out of 4 there. The value. They should be similar in worth. They should be similar in appearance. Look as much the same as possible. Kumatan. Their size should be the same. Okay, and they should be purchased at the same time if possible. Okay, I guess that's the halacha. That's how you do this law. But I want us to think, like, why? Why is that important? Given everything we've been studying so far, and you have these 2 goats, and one goes to God, and one goes, why is it important? And let's just finish the mitzvah so that we see exactly how this works here. So it is the best way to do this mitzvah is that they be bought at the same time. But even if they are not alike in any of these ways, they're still valid. Even if they're not alike in any ways, they're still valid. So you just taught me the law that they have to be exactly alike, but if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And even if one was bought today and the other one was bought tomorrow, that's still valid. Because okay, so that's interesting. I want us to think about both. Why do they have to be exactly alike? And why does it ultimately not matter? That's like bizarre. Maybe let's stop there because I really want to. This is going to be. It feels like random, but this is going to be important for us. So let's dig in here. Why do you think they have to be exactly alike? And well, let's start there. Why do you think they have to be? Why is it so important?
Well, the whole Yom Kippur ritual is an exercise of sameness and identity. Right? We're supposed to identify with the high priest. We're supposed to identify with the goat. We're supposed to identify with both of them equally.
So finish the thought.
So if they're not identical, I may identify with one of them more than the other.
Okay. So it is like in Yonatan's language, a kind of an identification with both of these goats that we need to have, and so they have to be similar. But to abstract that even further, we have to have some similar relationship to both of these goats. They have to at least appear to us or seem to us. It's important that we feel the same about them. And Yonatan's saying it's important in fact that we actually identify with both of them. Okay, let's keep going. Joni?
Hi, everybody. I was thinking that the similarity, the striving for similarity is the same striving that we all do for certain kinds of good behavior, ethical behavior, a way to be in the world. And then, well, they could be different or not quite the same is some latitude. Hoping that God gives us latitude that if our strivings fall short.
Okay, good. Thank you for addressing the other part here. The sort of like, yeah, it have to be exactly the same, but it doesn't really matter. Which is to say, there's some ideal, some vision where we and Joni says we strive for this sort of realization of an exactitude and of an equivalency here. But let's be honest, that's not really the way it works. And if nothing's ever exactly right and nothing's ever exactly even. And this, in other words, this ceremony that we're trying to play out, let's be honest, it's not actually going to work. I mean, we should try to make it work because for it to work perfectly, it has to be like two atoms of exactly the same size, and right? It's like these two atomic units that are indistinguishable. Okay, Wendy, and then Payam.
Following along with both of those, both Joni and Yonatan, what struck me, or what I was thinking maybe, we are alike and yet different. And Yonatan was talking about identifying with these goats. Each one of us looks similar. We have two eyes, we walk, talk, what have you, but we're different. And if we're looking at this maybe symbolically, and this is a huge thing to ask of us, to really to recognize our faults and our attributes and our positive parts of our behavior. So here we're watching it symbolically with these two goats, so that they are maybe alike, but not totally alike, just like we are not totally alike, that we are different. And yet this still holds for each one of us, even though we have our own individual identities as human beings.
Okay, great. Payam.
I think I call it the Enigma of Yom Kippur, in that in order for the world to be fair, for you not to know what's going to happen, who's going to live, who's going to die, the two things have to be identical. There has to be a 50-50 chance of either one. So I guess if like one goat is like deformed and that one always goes to Azazel, then you're going to be, well, the game's fixed. Like I know like what kind of people are going to be punished. But if they're the same, it goes along the concept of Yom Kippur of we don't know who's going to turn into what or what's going to happen to whom.
Okay, great. I thank you, Payam. I love that language. I think it's very helpful, that language of uncertainty. And in order to be uncertain, it has to be even odds. And that feeling of uncertainty should perhaps, I think Payam suggests, surround us on Yom Kippur, where we don't know our own fate and we don't know anyone's fate, and everything feels up in the air and uncertain, and who shall live and who shall die, right? So that, I think, is true. And at the same time, I want to point out about that theme itself, the theme of uncertainty, that there's something about that doesn't quite make sense for Yom Kippur, because what do you mean we don't know who shall live and who shall die? Isn't it the good people that live? And isn't it the bad people that die? But no, that isn't, we don't boldly parade into Yom Kippur saying, and the good shall live and the bad, but we recognize that there's uncertainty and we don't know who is the good and who is the bad. And these goats in Payam's description help to remind us that it could really go either way. It can't be all tilted toward, and the big fat goat goes toward God's, and this like runt goat will take our, like it would be too easy to map out what goes where and how it works. Okay, let's stop here because we could keep going, but we're really working in abstractions. I just want to point out that that's the way the narration of this ceremony starts, and it seems important. Let's continue, and in the meantime, let me give you the source sheet so you can look at it yourself. Let's continue. Just even in this Mishnah, I want to just read the rest of it. Okay, so if one was bought today and one the other bought tomorrow, they're still valid. Okay, if one of them died before the lot was cast, another one is bought for the second one. So you buy two, but one of them dies. So you just buy another one to substitute. But if one of them died after the lot was cast, somehow during the ceremony, one of them dies, then the pair must be bought and he must cast lots again. Okay? For timing reasons, I won't turn this back out at the group again, but I might ask you the same thing. What is the meaning of this? What is the meaning of this, that they are interchangeable to a point? You can get that pair going to a point, but once the die has been cast, once you've actually designated, one goes there and one goes there, they're a unit now, okay? And if one of them fails, that's it. We have to start over. They're tied together somehow, okay? So let's just keep that in mind. Okay, now here we go. Let's get to the drama. Let's get to the scapegoat. What happens out there in the wilderness? And here we begin the narration. He came to the scapegoat. In other words, the priest came to the scapegoat. Sa'ir hamishtalech. Literally in Hebrew, it's the goat that gets sent off. And he laid his two hands upon it, and he would make confession. And thus he would say, please, Hashem, Ana Hashem. They have done wrong. They have transgressed. They have sinned before you. Confession's different now, right? It's not I, it's they, it's us. They have sinned before you, your people, the house of Israel. Please, in the name of God, forgive the wrongdoings, the transgressions, the sins, which your people, the house of Israel, have committed and transgressed and sinned before you. It is written in the Torah of Moses, your certain servant, for on this day shall atonement be made for you, to cleanse you of all your sins. You shall be clean before the Lord. And the priests and the people standing in the courtyard, when they would hear God's name explicated coming out of the high priest's mouth, would bend their knees, bow down, and fall on their faces and say, blessed be the name of God's glorious kingdom forever and ever. Okay, that we've actually, dramatic, wonderful confession. We've seen it before. This is the third of 3 confessions. So we've seen this before. So, but this one goes over the scapegoat. Fine. I don't think we need a lot of time analyzing that, but that's the confession made on our behalf. Okay, and then the story continues. They handed it over to him who was to lead it away. Everyone, okay, so remember the Torah said a designated guy, not the high priest. The high priest is back at the temple or at the Mishkan offering the goat, the other goat to God. But there's somebody who's going to take it away, and so they hand it over to this somebody. Everyone is considered kosher to lead it away, hakol ksherin lo licho, but the priest made a fixed rule not to permit an Israelite to lead it away. Rabbi Yossi said, it once happened that Arsela led it away, although he was an Israelite. Okay, I don't know, like, I don't know whether, I should probably just blow by this. It's not a lot to, like, it's an interesting little moment, a little record of anyone can lead the goat away, but the priests made sure that only priests would lead it away. They wouldn't let regular Israelites, you know, there's a kind of a caste system in Israel where there's priests, Levites, and the rest of us, Israel. So, but I just want to take one moment just to think about, like, that's interesting. Anyone can be the person to take the goat away. But the priest said only priests should do it. But actually, once an Israelite do it, and that was fine. Anybody want to respond? I mean, I don't have an intelligent question here, but I just hear echoes. There's a certain kind of thematic similarity, like any old person. No, it has to be exactly that. No, well, what, like anything popping into your mind here? Anthony.
What pops into my mind is what the Talmud says about women reading the Torah. It says everyone can read the Torah, but women don't. So there's something about you have a rule, but then you narrow it.
All right, what is going on here where there's a kind, the rule is everybody should participate, and the priests come in and they say, no, we'll take care of this. And then it actually is not the case that anyone can do it. This is like it's just this sort of continuing uncertainty and the continuing kind of like oscillation between exactitude and openness. Okay, I don't want to make too much of this. Hiro, do you want to add to this? No? Yes? No? Okay, all right, so then let's move forward. Let's get back into this drama, because we have some revelations that we need to get to. Okay, so the guy's walking the goat out into the wilderness, and apparently the rabbis tell us there were little like it was a big deal, and he's walking out of the center of the city, right out into the wilderness, center of Jerusalem, and apparently there were little like booths set up, right, with food and water. Right, which is interesting. Like this guy gets to drink and eat water, right? So at every booth, and the booth, the word for booth here is the word for our holiday, sukkah. At every booth, at every station, they would say to him, here is food and here is water. And they went with him. Actually, you know, now that I'm thinking, maybe it's food and water for the goat. I didn't look this up. So actually, that would make more sense. It seems strange that he's eating, right? But okay, maybe it's for the goat. Here's food and here's water. And they went with him from booth to booth, except the last one, who would not go with him up to Tzuk, but would rather stand from afar to see what he was doing. Okay, so this is like part of the drama. He's leading the goat out, and there's little stations, and as he moves forward, everybody kind of piles in behind him, like, what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? And Tzuk is the name of the mountain. That is, they've imagined that Azazel is the name of the wilderness, and Tzuk is the name of the mountain that, as we've already said, the goat will be shoved off.
Why would it be definite then?
Definite
Letzuk
what?
and not letzuk. It would seem to be taking with him to
the
a
tzuk?
cliff, right? Tzuk
Right.
means cliff.
Yeah, you mean that is tzuk like a word that means cliff instead of the name of the place? Is that what you're saying?
Right. Yep.
Yeah, maybe I don't actually, I've always understood it to be the name of a place, but maybe that was take him to the cliff. The whole thing's a little ambiguous, because is Azazel the name of a place or the name of a god or the name of a kind of a certain kind of region? But yes, I'm not sure. All I know is that they take this goat to Tzuk, and it does seem like a mountain because, and here we get to it. So like here's the moment. And it's not going to be the most dramatic moment in our learning today, but here is the moment of the scapegoat. What did he do? Mahaya said, Cholek lashon shel zohrit, he divided the thread of crimson wool and tied one half to the rock and the other half between its horns and pushed it from behind, and it went rolling down. And before it had reached half its way down, it had broken into limbs. Ivarim, it was made into limbs. That's not it's broken its limbs. Nasa ivarim. It was made into limbs. Right? Disgusting, description there. And he came back and sat under the last booth until it grew dark. Okay. Now, that's the moment, that's the scene, and I built this up so much it may seem like a little anticlimactic, like that was it. But there is something strange that we notice when we see that scene, right? What's the unusual detail? Payam?
The rock. What the heck's the rock for?
The rock. That's not what I was thinking. Okay, fine.
Crimson thread?
It's I was thinking of the crimson thread. The crimson thread. The crimson thread suddenly pops out of like literally like, you know, you can imagine it sticking out. There's a red crimson thread. Okay. Now we've actually seen this before. I had it actually on one of our source sheets, but I don't think we had time to study it. So let's take a look at it again, because we got word of this crimson thread earlier on. Earlier, we learned that the high priest bound a thread of crimson wool on the head of the goat, which was to be sent away. And so that's the thread. And I guess it's long enough that the guy who takes it away eventually can tie one half to the rock and the other to the horns. I'm not sure why. Why does the thread need to be tied there? The priest, again, just back in the earlier chapter, the priest bound a thread of crimson wool on the head of the goat which was to be sent away, and he placed it at the gate where it was later to be sent away. And on the goat that was to be slaughtered, he placed a thread of crimson wool on its neck at the place of slaughtering. And then we get that earlier confession, which I'll just skip. So again, the priest ties a thread of crimson wool on the head of the goat, and then puts it over there, and then ties another thread of crimson wool. And I'm using the language here is horit, which is some kind of red dyed wool, right? But the translation is crimson here. And I wanna like leave that translation because it is like, we need to figure out what's going on with that thread. What is the significance of that thread? But before we do, or as we do, it is worth asking, what does a crimson thread remind us of? Because as readers of this tradition, when we hear about a crimson thread, there's a reference point there. Yeah? Rabbi Barbara Zaki, do you have it? I can't hear you.
I was just thinking of the one colored strand on the tzitzit.
Okay.
But that's more blue, I think.
Blue.
Crimson.
That's
but I'm
blue.
thinking of that color and it's like the sky and water and
something like that.
creation.
Something like that. We're thinking of like a one thread that distinguishes something, but a red thread. This is, by the way, if some of you are thinking like, don't the Kabbalists, like, don't they wear like a little red thread around their arm? Right? Like, isn't that
yeah, it's like a reminder.
What's that? It's a reminder.
It's like a reminder of something.
Where's it come from? It comes in part from this, but there's an earlier source. Yeah, Matt.
Okay, I know that North African Jewish households paint their doorways red for Passover.
Okay, interesting. That would be a reference to probably the red on the blood of the door. Right? Which also might be part of this symbolic language. But there is an even more direct reference here. Okay, I'm gonna, and unless anyone feels like I got it and I have to say it.
Rahab put a red crimson on her door.
Rahav, yes. So that's
Jacob and Esau.
What's that?
Jacob and Esau.
Not quite, although close.
Why wasn't there crimson thread on
I know what, okay,
one of them?
Okay, this is great. David says Jacob and Esau. Wasn't there a crimson thread on Jacob and Esau? No, there wasn't, but it's exactly the right mistake to make. Because Jacob and Esau are twins, born at the same time. There's only one other pair of twins in the Torah, and there is where we find our crimson thread. So let's just take a look at this. When the time came for Tamar, now this is Judah and Tamar. Judah, who ends up thinking his daughter is a prostitute, or his daughter-in-law is a prostitute and sleeping with her because he's denied her to a sense, long, complicated and kind of lurid history there. But they have a child, and when the time came for Tamar to give birth, there were twins in her womb. While she was in labor, one of them put out his hand, and the midwife tied a crimson thread on that hand to signify this one came out first. But just then he drew back his hand, and out came his brother instead. And she said, "What a breach you have made for yourself." So he was named Perez, or Peretz. Okay. So it's the second, David's like almost right? David's mind is in the right place. It's the second pair of twins in the Torah, and one of them in this scene gets a crimson thread tied around him. But the other one, in order to indicate that he's the firstborn, but the other one ends up being the firstborn. The other one punches his way out, right? Okay. Okay, that's just the beginning here, but that's striking. That's striking. Let's follow the thread, right? Okay, so we've got a crimson thread tied around the goat that goes off the cliff here, and actually a crimson thread tied around the goat. I actually can't tell from it almost feels like they're connected by a thread, but it doesn't seem like the way that ultimately the description seems like there's two different threads because one of them gets tied to a rock out there. Okay, but if it is a reference point, what's the reference point? Why evoke the crimson thread? Well, what is it about that earlier scene of those two boys, one of whom was designated to be firstborn and the other one who ends up being firstborn? Let's start to draw a connection here. These two symbols are clearly in some kind of conversation, or at least I want to make the case they are and keep making it. Okay, David Kurtz.
Okay, so I went kind of deep into this because I think it was Susan last week spoke about Isaac and Ishmael. And that kind of got me into this whole intertextual adventure. And it led me, interestingly, to Jacob and Esau. I wrote some notes here. When Rebecca set the fateful plot to gain Esau's blessing for Isaac, the trickery revolved around a stew, right? She was going to make the stew to give it to Isaac. Okay. She said, "Go to the flock and fetch me 2 choice kids, young goats, to make the stew your father likes." Framed it as bring upon himself a curse. So Rebecca said the curse will be on her. So this whole deceptive episode, Esau's fury forces Jacob to flee for Haran, actually into the wilderness, and where he had the dreams and all this kind of thing. But whenever people go into the wilderness in Genesis, and even in Exodus, something really happens. It's like that's where God is. So, Moses certainly had the burning bush there. Ishmael and Hagar, I mean, on and on. And Jacob actually has, his whole dream thing. Everything happens in the wilderness. There's a kind of redemption and a kind of adventure there that happens, which can and most of them, interestingly enough, kind of come from some kind of sin. In other words, they've sinned or done something wrong. And certainly the Jacob-Esau story, that's huge. And it's sent out to the desert. So there's something in there. But it was interesting when you said Jacob and Esau, it's like, wow, my brain popped. Good.
Okay, good. David is there. David is taking us almost all the way there. And in fact, some great details there that let's circle back to those. I didn't even think about the 2 goats that Rebecca prepares for Isaac. But let's hold David for 5 more minutes because David's running away with the game here. But that's great. But just for a second, let's just stay with the other twins. There's 2 boys. They're in, Tamar's in labor. One of them starts to come out. There's been all this drama for all these years over who's the firstborn in Genesis. So the nursemaid gets, wise and says, well, we'll just avoid this conflict by tying a red string, a crimson string, around who ends up being Zerach. But that's just a hand that comes out, and then all of a sudden, Peretz comes out. So the one designated to be the firstborn is not the firstborn, but carries that red string. And the one who doesn't have the red string actually came forth as the firstborn. Now, what does that have to do with our 2 goats? Susan?
Doesn't matter. Either one is fine.
Doesn't matter. Either one is fine.
Yeah.
Good. Right.
that the sins are on one or the other. They're equal. It's not like one's worse or bad, but that's the whole point, is that both are the same. One goes out, one stays with us.
Yeah. So much emphasis placed on the firstborn. Oh, the firstborn. It's such a big, but as we know, Genesis undermines that, and and says maybe the secondborn can actually receive the blessing, the destiny, the heritage, right? But when they're twins, you really have a sense that it doesn't, like, the firstborn idea is silly. Like, what does it mean that one should get more and one should get less and one should be blessed and one should be cursed and what? Like, they're the same. They're the same. And in this case, it's like, they're so the same that they're actually, one's about to be firstborn and the other one's firstborn. It's a matter of seconds. They're the same. Okay, good. Payam? No Payam? No Payam. Last chance, Payam. Okay, let's now just look, and we're soon gonna really explode things, right? Because David's already basically done that for us. But let's finish the ceremony, because the ceremony, the crimson string, like if you think I'm making a big deal about this crimson, oh, I found a crimson string. Look, I could think of another one. You think like, oh my gosh, Rabbi Kasher, like you get a little too carried away here. Let's just look at how central the crimson string actually is in the ceremony. Let's look at the last Mishnah here that we have, where they said to the high priest, right, back in the camp, they say to the high priest, the goat has reached the wilderness, okay? In other words, they do that because the priest is waiting. Priest is waiting to sacrifice the other goat until that goat has been pushed off. They say the goat has reached the wilderness, and how did they know that the goat had reached the wilderness? They used to set up scouts. And the Mishnah answers, and they would wave scarves, and they would know that the goat had reached the wilderness, like little smoke signals, right? They'd wave flags, like all along those stations. Now this is fascinating. Rabbi Judah says, yeah, but Halo Siman Gadol Haya Lahem, didn't they have an amazing sign? From Jerusalem to Beit Hidudo, the Mishnah continues, was 3 mills. They could walk a mill, return the mill, and then wait the time it takes to walk a mill. And thus they would know that the goat had reached the wilderness. But Rabbi Yishmael said, but did they not have another sign? Halo siman acher haya lahem? And then a thread of crimson wool, they say, was tied to the door of the temple. And when the goat reached the wilderness, that is when the goat went off the cliff, the thread turned white. As it is written, though your sins be scarlet, they shall become as white as snow. Famous line that you'll see throughout the high holiday liturgy. Now, I have to say, I can't even follow literally the threads here, but like in a way they all feel connected. Like it seems like there's a thread that goes from the neck of the one goat to the door of the temple out into the wilderness. It's almost like you can see the red disappearing in the white. You know what I mean? Like that's what it almost feels like they're waiting for the thread to turn. But I don't know. All I know is that there are these threads all around, and one of them is tied to the temple, and just like the other one was tied to the rock that the goat goes off, and they're waiting to see if the ceremony is performed right. And if it's performed right, the red, which symbolizes sin, is now going to be like cleansed, made white. Okay. Now we've got a lot of crimson thread, right? So is anybody willing to, anybody have a greater sense of the structure here of this symbolic structure here? Yonatan?
So I first want to say I'm a little bit frustrated at the Mishnah because I think they got the scene wrong with the goat. I don't think the goat my reading of Torah is that the goat does not get pushed off a cliff, but gets sent out into the desert. And I think the beauty of that and what this Mishnah tries eventually to capture is the uncertainty. It's like Schrodinger's goat. Is the goat alive? Is it dead? Who knows? You've got a goat wandering somewhere around your desert with some thread on its horns. What if somebody finds it, takes it into its goat herd? There's all sorts of things that could happen. And I think in this scene, they're really craving closure, right? In the sense of like, we'll have this signaling mechanism to let us know what's happened. The other goat has a lot more certainty attached to it, right? Like, you know that that goat's dead. You know that it's gone to Adonai, right? And maybe that's where the relationship between certainty and uncertainty is where this thread really plays in.
That's all very well said. I won't repeat that. That's all very well said. These themes we've looked at before. Payam?
I might complicate things more, but when I think of like wilderness and firstborns and secondborns, I think of Cain and Abel. And I think it's really interesting in this sense that the first one, which goes to Azazel, has to die first. And that like redeems the sins, because in essence, Cain is the first sin, right? And so it's like redemption, and he's a firstborn. So it's like the first one comes out, and like that redeems the original sin. And there's the whole wilderness thing of, you know, Cain says, I'm afraid of the others, and he goes out to who knows what. Like there's a parallel between the goat that goes to Azazel and Cain very much to me.
Yeah, I think that it's fair because to introduce Cain and Abel, because that's right. David already took us to this constant battle between siblings, brothers, one of whom is chosen, one of whom is cast aside. I forget who it was. Was it someone in a previous session spoke about the way that Hagar and Ishmael are cast out into the wilderness, right? Was that Susan? That imagery is with us. And, you know, in a way it starts with Cain and Abel. There are these two children, and one of them is favored by God for reasons we don't totally understand, and one of them is not. And it creates this tension. It leads to violence. Okay. So all of that stuff can be kind of swirling around in our head. David, I see David wanting to respond to this. Yeah.
I just have to throw some, it's going to take a little off track there, but in doing that whole research, what's interesting is Cain, when he goes out, he and his wife conceive Enoch. Am I pronouncing it right?
Yeah.
Enoch?
Right, yes.
Okay.
But like
the whole Azazel thing comes from the book of Enoch. So I mean, it's kind of there's an amazing thing there, because where Azazel is written is in the book of Enoch, and anyway, that whole thing takes. So it's kind of interesting that I just think that Cain and Abel comes into the whole thing too, because that's where Azazel kind of comes from.
Okay. I think it's time. I think it's because I can see everybody's like, there's something here. Like you see all these pieces, they're almost like coming together. And people like are now introducing their mind-blowing theories, and these may be. I'm happy to go down any of these directions with any of you all. But let me give you the one that I have been driving towards, and will say it's not mine. I wish I had come up with this connection, but I did not. I owe that to a great rabbi of the 20th century, Yitzchak Hutner, the Pachad Yitzchak, who writes these little homilies on the holidays. And this is one of the essays that he writes on Purim. And what's interesting is that about the fact that it's Purim is that Purim is also a place where we have goralot, lots cast, right? And that's what he's picking up on. And he makes this incredible connection. Now, it's worth reading this piece, number 6 in Purim, and it's like a very kind of beautiful philosophical sort of reflection. But I'm just going to borrow a few key connections that he makes. And here we're going to like, I want to like, as I said, David started to take us here, but I want to like pave one path fully towards a certain kind of understanding of the crimson thread and the two goats all together. Okay, so let's take a look. The Pachad Yitzchak says, but there are two goats in Yom Kippur, but the original goat, HaSe'ir HaKadum, L'shnei Seirei Yom Kippur, the original Se'ir, which preceded the two goats of Yom Kippur, was the first man of Se'ir, Esau. The first Ish HaSa'ir was Esau. Okay, and then we'll figure out the rest of it soon. But he goes on to say, and this is the awesome secret of Isaac's love for Esau. And therefore, the real difference between them is hidden in the separate blessings given to Jacob and Esau. Okay? Remember, there's this whole scene where Isaac wants to bless Esau, but ends up blessing Jacob. And ends up blessing Jacob because Jacob dresses up to look like Esau. Okay? Now, in case you didn't catch the language there, when we first learn about Jacob and Esau, the Lord answered Rebekah, 2 nations are in your womb, 2 separate people shall issue from your body. One shall be mightier than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. When her time to give birth was at hand, there were twins in her womb. The first one emerged red, like a hairy coat all over, so they named him Esau. So he was red, and he was Ka'aderet Se'ar, right? Hairy is, Se'ar means hairy. And that seems to be the language, both the language of red and the language of hairy gets taken forward so that when Esau grows up, he's settled in the hill country of Seir, in other words, goat. Esau being Edom, in other words, the red. Okay? Okay? So, tell me, let's go back here. He says the 2 goats are a reference to the original man of Seir, the original goat man. And the original goat man is Esau. And we knew that Isaac loved Esau and wanted to bless Esau, but there's some difference between them that is buried in the secret, hidden in the blessing ceremony. Okay, so let's tease this out for me. What does this mean? What is he trying to say? What is the connection between the 2 goats of Yom Kippur and the 2 brothers, Jacob and Esau, and their fate in the blessing ceremony that Isaac administered? And let's just actually, to complete the picture, let's remember the rest of this introduction to them. Because the first one emerged red like a hairy coat all over, so they named him Esau. But then his brother emerged, holding on to the heel of Esau, so they named him Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when they were born. When the boys grew up, Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the outdoors, but Jacob was a mild man who stayed in the camp. Isaac favored Esau because he had a taste for game. Isaac loved Esau, but Rebekah favored Jacob. Okay, all right. Played a little bit with the parallel between twins and the 2 goats with the Crimson Thread story, but now we've got the ultimate story of, right? David started to take us here. David Goldberg started to take us here earlier. David Kurtz took us here. What are the Davids telling us? David Kasher is taking us here. What are the Davids telling us? What is the connection between Jacob and Esau, that foundational story, and the 2 goats of Yom Kippur? I see. Okay, see some hands up. Hannah.
Oh no, this will be useless now. At least
no.
It's not. It's just typical me fixating on something that's not the point. So I just have other questions and they're not relevant, but I will ask them at a later time maybe.
Okay, you're welcome.
I just want to know about the guy who takes the goat off the mountain and then sits all day by himself at this stall. Like, I can't get past that. I haven't been able to focus on anything. Like, I'm just so consumed by him, and I want to know about his whole emotional experience, and I want to know why he didn't go tell them that the ritual was over. I want to know why he couldn't have been the messenger of that. Why is his job only to send this goat off, and then he has to be alone in his grief of that or in his processing of that? And it has nothing to do with the red thread, or maybe it does, but that's where I'm stuck. So I should have lowered my hand, but I forgot.
No, that's great. First of all, I just love everything. The description you just gave is so beautiful, and we could sit and meditate on that moment. But also, I think you're right to emphasize the presence of this guy who could be anybody. Hakok Shirin. Everybody could be that guy, right? Who does that guy stand in opposition to? The high priest. The high priest, right? And the high priest, by the way, who has a little golden band on his forehead that says Kadosh LaHashem, designated to God, right? And then some random guy in the wilderness whose doing the work for Azazel. Right? So there is a kind of these two figures, the high priest, the only one who's going to redeem us all and be, bring us closer to God. And then this other guy who's actually taking our sins away. Who's actually doing the dirty work, right? In a sense. Okay, that's important. That is important. Wendy.
A couple of things. First of all, Jonathan, I agree with you. I want to see the goat go into the wilderness. Just as our negative behavior, we don't know if it will return. It's going out somewhere. It's not absolutely dead to us. It could recur. But when you were talking about the red thread, red is also, when you're talking about red is the color of blood that connects us all. And when we talk about thread, we often talk about a running theme that connects us. There's a thread that we're connected by. So here is this red thread. So I thought that symbolic thread that we are connected, our sins to our good behavior. This is all connected. And red's a powerful color. And I think, anyway, that was.
Okay. Esau, our brother, is known as the red, right? Esau sells his birthright away for that red stuff, right? Esau's kingdom becomes known as like the Edomites, the red ones, right? And all of the associations that we have with red, and bloodiness and ruddiness and, a guy of the field, a guy of the wilderness, a mountain man, Okay, but why would the Pachad Yitzchak draw us back to the blessing ceremony where Jacob stole Esau's blessing and became the chosen one? What's important about all? Make some holiday sense of this, why don't you? Like, I'm sitting there now in ancient Israel watching these two goats be taken to their different places, or I'm sitting today in modern synagogue and reading through this service, and if the Pachad Yitzchak is right, and if some of these reference points are well drawn, then there's something about these two goats that is meant to remind me of the original split between Jacob and Esau, and maybe meant to remind me of all those splits where one person gets cast aside and one person gets chosen, right? Certainly you can hear the way that the themes here echo the casting of lots but what does it all mean? What does it all come to? All right, Emil. Emil, I can't hear you. Oh, and yet you are on mute. Oh, okay. There you are.
So red is like associated with like casting out and the stuff that we repress and the stuff that is not, chosen, right? But then there's this thing of arbitrary, there's like an arbitrary theme that's emerging where like, ideally you, the firstborn, the good one, get the prize, but not always. And if you don't, then that's okay too. And it feels like that's tying into what you're saying. Like we say the good live and the bad will die, but we also say, there's also something in the liturgy about like, God is good to everyone, the good and the bad alike, and that's great, and that's his praise. So there's this X factor of like, we don't really know who's good or bad. And beyond that, we don't know who deserves to live or die. There's something very humbling about, it's like the best goat should live and the worst one should die. But if that doesn't happen, then that's okay too. And so there's a kind of, I don't know, like a theme of cosmic acceptance that's coming through, or like the person that we think deserves to be the chosen one isn't always the chosen one, or like sometimes someone else puts their fist out first and they get the red ribbon. So like, I don't know, like these are all the things that you've been hinting at, I think.
Yeah, it's great. Okay, great. So let's start. We have only a few minutes left. So Emil is doing, thank you for doing some of the heavy lifting for us. Let's start to put this together, right? Who is the good child? Is it Esau or is it Jacob? right? It's Jacob, obviously. Jacob's a good child. Jacob's the inheritor of the birthright. Jacob's the one favored by God. And yet, as we know, it's not that simple. Jacob sort of stole it, lied to his father, took it. And in order to fool his father, Jacob had to look exactly like his brother. In fact, let me just add to this. There's a beautiful midrash that I think echoes the Isaac was 60 years old when they were both born, and the lads grew, and both of them went to school, and both of them came home, and no one could tell the difference between them until they were 15 years old, right? So though the Torah accentuates some of their differences, there is some notion that they were the same. They were exactly the same. They were just two halves of the same whole. And yet, one of them pushes the other one out. One of them ascends to glory. One of them is favored. One of them is remembered as a hero, and one of them is remembered as a villain. But it actually, not only it seems somewhat arbitrary, but it actually isn't really fair. It's not really fair because the hero, the good one, us, we lied to get there. We stole it. We have sins that we're still carrying, right? It's not so clear that Esau, the one that gets pushed out into goat country, actually deserves to be the loser, right? Okay, all right. A few more comments and then we'll close. Payan?
I think it's about we want to be Esau, but society needs us to be Jacob. Like we want to be wild and free and like not have societal constraints. But in order for society to like prosper, we need to be Jacob. If you look at like anthropology, we started as hunters. That's what Esau is. And then we built agriculture. That's what Jacob is. But in order to build the agriculture, we pretty much slaughtered and committed genocide against all the wild, wilderness hunters in society. So, yeah.
There's something about Esau that we can't let go of. There's something about Esau that remember, and the Pachad Yitzchak says this as well. Isaac loved Esau. Isaac wanted to bless Esau. Esau should have been the one for all, and all that Esau represents, Esau's power, why did Isaac love Esau? Because Esau was strong. Because Esau was a hunter, right? But Jacob was wily, and Jacob figured it all out, right? Okay, one last comment. David Kurtz, you exploded for us earlier.
Well, none of this is resonant in the Mishnah is great, but none of this is resonant in the original story. I mean, that Isaac loved Esau or any of those kinds of things. I mean, basically, the real sin was Rebecca. She's the one who led the whole thing. And none of this would have happened if it wasn't for the agency of Rebecca. So, so I'm kind of lost with where this whole thing went a little bit, because I don't think it's really clear that that Jacob is necessarily the good guy. That's our story and everything else. But I mean, that's just the reading of it in itself. So, I mean, that goat in going out to the wilderness, sometimes your sin can be thrust upon you, or somehow it can come through deception. And maybe that's what that other goat is about. Maybe it's for sometimes for the sins that we're not responsible for, we realize later on in life. And it's uncertain. And it's uncertain what will happen with that.
That's exactly the point. I mean, that's exactly the point, is that Jacob's not the good guy. The point of this ceremony, I think, if it references Jacob and Esau, is that we want to be seen as good. We want to be the good ones. We want to survive. We want to be the ones that receive divine favor. But we know somehow, in a deep, deep way that goes all the way back, we know that if we succeed in the world, someone else will not. Someone just like us, someone maybe we love, someone who maybe deserved it more than we do. So we have to acknowledge that. And we have to atone for the fact that, I mean, this is like privilege, but in the deepest sense. We have to atone for the fact that we got to where we are, and it wasn't all clean, and it wasn't all good, and it's not clear that the other goat exactly like us deserves to go off the cliff, right? So there's a tension there. There's a way in which they have to be exactly alike, because neither of these goats was supposed to be the goat for God. There's something a little arbitrary about all of this, and this is Payam brought this up at the start. There's something a little bit uncertain about the whole thing, and we know it because we know the sins we carry, and we know what we did wrong to get here. So if we are going to be forgiven, it has to take into account somehow the other brother, right? The other one exactly like us who, but for a simple twist of fate, right? But for Rebecca loving him instead of us, would have been the one who went La Hashem, right? And we would have been the one that went off the cliff. Okay? So I think that's part of what's going on in the goat ceremony. We're at time, so I'll end there. I hope you like this as much as I did. I think this is it. I think this is the secret. I think this is the secret to Yom Kippur. I think it's all about realizing actually that, like, yes, God's going to save us, but that doesn't make us clean. That we have to do the work. We have to acknowledge that there are brothers and sisters out there that we have harmed, that we need to remember, that should be here standing alongside us, right? Exactly like us. So, all right, everyone, have a good rest of your afternoon. This is the last of this series because Labor Day next week and then the high holidays, but we'll have our Maimonides class tomorrow at 6 and of course Parsha on Wednesday at 12. Nice to see you all. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Rabbi Kasher.
Thank you. I'm glad I jumped on today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Remember the red thread.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Hi, Lillian.
Hi.
Good to see you.
I have one more question.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Well, the question that always plagued me was, why was I the one that survived the Holocaust? It's always a question.
Yeah.
I know there were worthier people, a lot of them. So it's something that you have to live with and try to.
She survived the Holocaust.
To make up for it in some way, you know?
Yeah.
Or pay back to society or whatever you want to call it, to feel, why you?
Yeah, thank you, Lillian. That's, you have the right to give that reflection. But yeah, I think that's the most profound echo of this uncertainty. Why me? Why am I the one that make it? Yeah. Thank you, Lillian. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Bye, everyone.